In our previous video, we looked at the north side of Water Street. Today we want to look at the south side. And this is what the south side looks like. This is looking east on Water Street, much different than the time period when I was growing up. Back then, it looked more like this. And as I said in our last video, it consists basically of two buildings, and you can see how they're distinguished pretty much in this photograph. And looking in the opposite direction, it looked like this. And you can see that there's other businesses besides the Barnett store in that larger building. Some of the ones you can see here and that I remember is, of course, Bill the Hatter, Central Shoe Services, Satellite Bar, Western Union, Stevenson's Electric, and probably a couple more that I can't remember. But we have a couple more pictures, so we'll look at a couple of these. You might be able to see them a little bit closer. It's a little hard to make out, but right next to Bill the Hatter, you can see Central Shoe Service. And in this photograph, you've got a little more, a better picture of it anyway. Not all of it, but there's part of it here. I think the main thing they were taking a picture of the building that was next door to it, and that was Smoker's Haven. And as the signage would indicate, it had all kinds of smokes there. I especially remember the R.G. Dunn cigars. My dad in his younger years used to smoke them, and sometimes would send me down to the corner store and pick up an R.G. Dunn. And for some reason, I kept this box, a box similar to this anyway, for years. Kept my small shoe accessories in it. I don't know whatever happened to it. I think it got lost in the move. But I remember that well. After 106 years of producing cigars, the R.G. Dunn Company folded in 1990. Here's a photo of the inside of Smoker's Haven, and as you can see, it's pretty well packed full. Next to Smoker's Haven was the Satellite Bar, just about the middle of the block. You can see it was situated between Smoker's Haven to the east and Western Union to the west. And here's a look at the inside with one of the bands playing. Next door to the Satellite was Western Union. Western Union has always had a very prominent place in my heart because that's where my wife came to Port Huron to work. So if it hadn't been for Western Union, this couple here wouldn't be married 57 years this June. I was so fortunate to have her come into my life, and even more fortunate that she put up with me for 57 years. All right, that's enough nostalgia. Next door to Western Union, taking up the corner of the Custom Alley and Water Street, was Stevenson's Electric Company. Of course, that was around when I was there, and it's still around today. And it's been around for a long time. It goes all the way back to 1886. In this booklet entitled Port Huron in 1900, it shows the inside of Stevenson's Electric and gives a little bit of an advertisement with it. Let's just take a look at it. It says D.J. Stevenson makes a specialty of fine electrical goods and work, and his list shows some of the best contacts done in the county. There is always a large stock of sundries for fancy decorations such as colored lights, globes, chandeliers, etc. Mr. Stevenson employs none but skilled workmen and will not let a contract leave his hands until it is satisfactory. There's another department at 520 Water Street that is very important to the average person. I thought this was kind of unusual being an electrical company. It says this: bicycles are cleaned and repaired on short notice. They can also be stored for the winter and kept as good as new until spring. If you contemplate improving or putting in new electrical fixtures, don't fail to get Stevenson's figures. I told you that Stevenson Electric was still in business, and they're now located on 24th Street on the corner of Vine and 24th. And you can see it's quite a bit different than their original building. It always amazes me when a company can stay in business for over 100 years. Something to be very proud of. Well, that pretty well covers this block, at least the buildings and businesses that I remember during my lifetime in Port Huron. But Every decade had different businesses there. Not all the businesses certainly were as successful as Stevenson Electric. I thought this photograph was interesting here because it shows Citizens Federal on the opposite side of the street, where normally we're used to seeing Citizens Federal on the north side of Water Street. And like I say, the businesses change. Just to the east, where Central Shoes used to be, was Port Huron Shoes and Hat Company. And then just to the west, where Satellite Bar was, used to be the Victoria Bar. Let's go back a few more decades, all the way back to the horse and buggy days, as you can see in this postcard here. And you see the same buildings, but of course different businesses. And let's take a few minutes to look at some of the businesses that were in the block at that time. The three businesses we want to look at were also found in the booklet Port Huron in 1900. And the first one is Young Shoe Store, which is this photograph here. And as we expand on it, we can see that there's writing alongside of it. And it's kind of interesting to see how they wrote about a business back in those days. Let's just take a gander. The first thing I noticed about these advertisements accompanying the pictures that are in this booklet is that rather than saying the accompanying photo illustrates the store, they always say the accompanying cut illustrates the store. I guess they always referred to that, at least back in those days, as a cut instead of a photograph. It starts off by telling a little bit about Mr. Young, where he was from and so forth. Then it goes on to say this: his store is very popular among the shoe buyers, and he is well satisfied with an ever-increasing business. He has the exclusive sale for the famous French Schreiner and Erner $3 to $6 shoes for men. Also the Drew, Selby and Company $2 to $5 shoes for ladies. In fact, Mr. Young's stock represents some of the best manufacturers of shoes in the country. He sells the celebrated Alfred Dodge felt shoes and slippers, which have a worldwide reputation for ease and comfort. I don't know about you, but anytime I hear that something has a worldwide reputation, it piques my curiosity. So I thought, well, I should be able to find something on this: felt shoes, slippers, and by cracky I did. Here's a couple ads I found on the internet. Here's ad number 1. And ad number 2. So I guess they were pretty popular. The next store we want to look at is the K.H. Hubbard store. And it's impossible to describe what was in this store. How do I know that? Because that's what the ad says. It says it contains a stock of goods almost impossible to describe. There are diamonds of the very latest cut, watches of every conceivable design, all the latest novelties in fancy jewelry, the latest thing in sheet music, belts, buckles, pins, and numerous beautiful ideas for ladies' wear. The latest magazines and papers are always on hand. A specialty is made of the repairing of watches, clocks, and jewelry. Mr. Hubbard also carries a complete line of optical goods. So this guy carried a little bit of everything. Magazines and diamonds in the same store. Go figure. The third business we want to look at is another shoe store, B.C. Farron Jr. Shoe Store. Very popular shoe store. They also had a location on Military Street, and for a while were running 2 stores. In this photograph, looking east on Water Street, you can see the shoe sign from the Farron Shoe Store hanging out above the sidewalk there, and of course you can see the pedestrians walking underneath it. Quite a unique photo, actually. In this photograph here, we're looking at the Stewart building, which is where Stevenson Electric was, but we're looking at it from the side of the building, basically where the Custom Alley is. We also see that there's a business there. The configuration of the doorway is different too. You can see the doorway is more in the corner of the building, There could have been another doorway further down, and Stevenson Electric was still in the building at the time. But in this particular section, you can see it was a telegraph company, but it wasn't Western Union. It was the Postal Telegraph and Cable Company, which was a competitor of Western Union. Western Union was the first telegraph company that came into Port Huron. Originally, they were located on Huron Avenue. And shortly after that, the Postal Telegraph Company came into being in Port Huron as well. Later on, Postal Telegraph would move over to Military Street. You can see it in this photograph here. Ironically, Western Union was on the same street, very close to Postal Telegraph, after they moved from Huron Avenue. You can see the signage here. Eventually, Postal Telegraph would be consolidated into Western Union. We all know what a Western Union telegram looks like, but in this photograph here, you can see the Postal Telegraph and what their telegram looked like. If you lived out of the city, more likely than not, the telegram would be mailed to you. Well, you ask, if they're going to be mailed, why not just mail a letter? Because the local mail was much faster. Usually the next day they would get mail, whereas cross-country it could be a week or so. It would seem that wherever the telegram was mailed to, the return address would be the home office in Georgia, at least according to the envelope here. If the telegram had to be delivered in the city where there was a telegraph office, of course the telegram would be hand delivered by one of these young fellows. Some of these delivery boys were very young, as you can see here. I guess if you could ride a bike, you could deliver a telegram. I found this postcard in my collection. It's a telegraph pole in Port Huron. It doesn't say where it is, but from the looks of the surrounding area, it almost looks like it could be near the McMorran elevators, but I don't know for sure. But you can see it's a very, very tall pole. I've never actually seen a telegraph pole like this. Most of the ones I've seen are like telephone poles, but that's because those had wires on them. And this is one of the first wireless poles that there was. This was introduced by Marconi, I believe around 1896. So this picture would have been sometime after that. I went looking to see if I could find any other pictures of towers around the world that were the wireless towers that Marconi had developed. And I did find a couple here. The first one was in Massachusetts, and the other one was in the United Kingdom. Hustaton. This station here, or this telegraph pole here, was almost by accident used for something else as well. The telegraph station found out was very successful in intercepting German naval and airship wireless signals, and eventually led to 14 of these towers being placed along the British coast to intercept these signals. Well, that was a little one of my side trips. Let's get back to the story at hand. For decades, the 500 block of Water Street, it looked about the same. The businesses were different, but the buildings were the same. Until at this point here where everything was torn down, and now it looks like this. So this would be a good thing or a bad thing. That would be in the eye of the beholder, but I'm sure you have a definite opinion on it. I know I do. In our next video, we'll walk across the custom alley. Well, if it was still there, we would walk across it, and we would come to the Federal Building, or the Custom Building, or the Post Office. It was different things to different people. We'll take a look at this building that's over 100 years old and built on an Indian burial ground. So join me then.